Okay, so picture this. You're trying to govern a continent. It's a huge task, right? Now imagine breaking that down into more than 270,000 individual village governments, each one with its own elected leaders. I mean, the scale is just staggering. That is India's great democratic experiment, the system they call Panchayat Raj. So let's dive into this massive experiment in grassroots power.
The whole idea behind this system comes from a really powerful ideal, one that Mahatma Gandhi talked about a lot. He had this dream of Gram Swaraj, which basically means complete village self-rule. He imagined every single village as its own self-sufficient republic. And this wasn't just some nice, quaint idea. It really became the philosophical soul of India's entire democratic structure.
And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Over 30 years ago, India took this dream and gave it real constitutional power, empowering all its villages to govern themselves. But here we are, decades later. Has that grand vision actually become a reality on the ground? Well, that's exactly what we're here to unpack.
Now, this dream of self-rule wasn't just left to chance or goodwill. No, it was formally written into law with the landmark 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act back in 1992. And this wasn't some minor tweak to the system. It was a fundamental change that added a brand new third tier of governance right at the grassroots.
So how does it all work? Well, the amendment laid out a pretty clear three-tier blueprint. At the very bottom, you've got the Gram Panchayat, which covers a single village or maybe a small cluster of them. Move up a level, and there's the Block Panchayat. And then at the top of this local structure, you have the Zila Parishad, which operates at the district level. The whole design is meant to handle issues from the superlocal all the way up to the district-wide.
And to make sure these bodies had real work to do, the Constitution lists 29 different jobs for them. I mean, everything from agriculture and water to local schools and healthcare. But, and you knew there was a but, right? Look at that tiny, crucial word on the screen, may. The Constitution says states may transfer these powers. It doesn't say they must. And that one little word, well, it creates a world of difference.
This really gets to the heart of how the whole thing was designed. On one hand, you have mandatory provisions. Every single state has to follow these, like setting up the three-tier system, holding elections every 5 years, and reserving seats for women in marginalized communities. But on the other hand, a lot of the really critical powers, like actually handing over those 29 functions or letting panchayats collect their own taxes, were left as voluntary. Now, this was supposed to allow for flexibility, but it's also the main reason why a village council in one state can be incredibly powerful, while one just across the border is almost powerless.
Okay, so we've seen the blueprint, a powerful idea backed by the Constitution itself. Sounds great on paper. But now let's do a reality check and see how this all actually plays out in the real world. With any form of government, it doesn't matter if it's a tiny village council or a huge national parliament, it always comes down to one simple question. Who controls the money? Because let's be honest, without financial power, self-rule is just a nice-sounding title.
And the answer, when you look at the data, is, well, it's startlingly clear. This chart shows that a whopping 95% of the money that panchayats have to spend comes from grants. It's handed down from the central and state governments. Only a tiny, tiny sliver, about 5%, is actually generated by the villages themselves. This creates a massive, massive dependency.
And let's put some hard numbers on that to see just how stark this is. The average Gram Panchayat might get is around 20 lakh rupees, but the average amount it raises all by itself? Just 21,000 rupees. That gap is just, wow. It means that for every 100 rupees a village council spends, it's probably only earned about one of those rupees on its own.
So this all boils down to a systemic challenge that experts call the 3 F's deficit. First, functions. Like we saw, states are often pretty reluctant to hand over all 29 subjects. Second, funds. A serious lack of financial independence. They just can't raise their own money. And finally, functionaries. These local governments have no real power to hire or manage their own staff. The people who work for them are usually state employees. So you see the problem. They have all this responsibility, but not the actual authority to get things done.
And beyond all these administrative hurdles, there are these deep-seated social challenges. Now, reserving seats for women was a revolutionary step, no doubt, but it also led to this strange thing called the Sarpanch Pati phenomenon, literally the husband of the leader. This is where a woman gets elected on paper, but in reality it's her husband or another male relative who's calling the shots, going to meetings, and making all the decisions. It's proxy rule, and it completely undermines the whole point of women's empowerment.
And the challenges just keep piling up.
Often, state governments will create these parallel bodies that do similar jobs and control big budgets, completely bypassing the elected Panchayat. You add that to political interference from the state level and the fact that local elites often capture resources for themselves, and you can see how the power of these grassroots institutions gets chipped away.
But look, this story is not one of failure. Not at all. It's really a story of evolution. Because in the face of all these huge challenges, there's a real effort underway, from the courts, from tech innovators, from policymakers, to bridge this governance gap and strengthen democracy right from the ground up.
The judiciary, for example, has stepped in as a crucial guardian. For years, states would just delay local elections for any old reason. But in a landmark case, the Supreme Court basically said no more. They ruled that holding timely elections is a non-negotiable part of the Constitution. That one ruling made sure the democratic process couldn't be so easily pushed aside. And technology is turning out to be a huge game changer for transparency. Just look at some of these tools. eGram Swaraj has pushed tens of thousands of crores in payments online where everyone can see them. Audit Online has cut audit times from months down to just weeks. And this is amazing. Subhasar uses AI to record and summarize village meetings in 13 different languages. That ensures that what people actually decided gets captured accurately.
There's also a big strategic shift going on. The government is now using these local councils to try and achieve the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. They've taken these 17 huge global goals and translated them into 9 concrete themes for villages, things like becoming a water-sufficient village or a child-friendly village. It's a really ambitious plan to connect local action to global priorities.
But here's where we get a fascinating peek into what local leaders prioritize. When these councils choose which goals to focus on, there's this really clear hardware bias. Something like 92% of them go for resolutions on tangible infrastructure projects. Clean water, roads, things you can see and touch. Only about 8% prioritize the trickier social goals, like becoming women-friendly. It shows a clear preference for physical development over that deeper social change.
So, where do we go from here? Well, major reform commissions have already laid out a pretty clear roadmap. The big items on the checklist are get rid of those parallel bodies so there's no confusion, give panchayats the power to hire their own staff or actually accountable to them, give them real control over their budgets, and create unified councils for better planning. These are the kinds of systemic fixes needed to truly empower them.
When you take a step back and look at the whole system, the original dream, all the flaws, but also all the potential, you really arrive at a powerful conclusion. These Panchayat Raj institutions, they aren't just another layer of bureaucracy. They are, as one analysis puts it, the very soul of India's rural democracy.
Which leaves us with one final thought. Is this soul vibrant and strong, truly powering the nation from its roots, or is it a powerful dream that even after 30 years is still fighting, still evolving, and still waiting to be fully realized? The answer, I think, probably lies somewhere in between, in the daily struggles and the small victories of millions of local leaders all across India.